Have you ever felt lost or unsure about what to do next? Today, we're going to talk about the amazing story of Ruth, a woman who faced tough choices but showed incredible faith and loyalty. Her journey teaches us important lessons about love, commitment, and trusting God, no matter what. Who was Ruth and why is she important in the Bible? Ruth is one of the most beloved women in the Bible, known for her loyalty and faith. Despite being a Moabite, a foreigner from a land often at odds with Israel, Ruth's story is a remarkable testament to how God can transform anyone's life through faith, perseverance, and humility. Her name is often associated with courage, love, and unwavering commitment, even in the face of hardship. But why is her story so important? Ruth's tale isn't just about a woman navigating personal loss and hardship, it's about God's incredible purpose for those who remain faithful, no matter their background or past. Ruth starts as an outsider, but through her obedience and willingness to follow God, she becomes part of something much greater, a lineage leading to King David and ultimately to Jesus Christ. This is a story of redemption, hope, and the power of faith that crosses barriers. Her story is a journey of transformation, from widowhood and despair to hope and blessing. Ruth's decision to leave her people and embrace the God of Israel was a step of faith that changed everything. This simple act of faith and loyalty led her to a new land, a new people, and a new purpose. Her life teaches us that faith isn't just about belief, it's about trusting in God's purpose, even when the future is uncertain. The book of Ruth holds a powerful message for anyone who feels like an outsider, who thinks their story is insignificant or that their past defines their future. In a few short chapters, the Bible takes us through Ruth's journey from a life of grief to one of purpose and honor. Ruth is celebrated not just for what she did, but for who she became through her faith and obedience. Through Ruth, we see how faith can transform even the darkest circumstances into a story of hope and redemption. Her story reminds us that when we stay faithful, even when life is tough, God can write a beautiful ending. Ruth went from a humble gleaner in the fields to the great-grandmother of King David, proving that no matter where we start, God's plan can always lead us somewhere far greater than we imagine. Historical context of Ruth, living in times of crisis and famine. Ruth's story begins in a time of crisis and uncertainty. The book of Ruth is set during the period of the Judges, a time when everyone did what was right in their own eyes, Judges 21 verse 25. It was a time marked by political instability, social unrest, and, for Ruth and her family, severe famine. This context is crucial because it sets the stage for the hard decisions that Ruth and her family had to make. Famine drove Ruth's husband's family from Bethlehem to Moab, a neighboring country. This was not just a physical move, but a spiritual and social challenge as well. Moab was considered an enemy of Israel, a place with different customs and a foreign faith. Yet, Ruth's family chose to settle there, highlighting the desperation they felt and the extent of the crisis in Bethlehem. Living in Moab, Ruth married into an Israelite family. But soon, tragedy struck. Her father-in-law, her husband, and her brother-in-law all died. This left Ruth, her sister-in-law Orpah, and her mother-in-law Naomi as widows in a society where women without male relatives were vulnerable and often destitute. The famine in Bethlehem, the loss of family, and the decision to stay or leave made this period one of great trial and uncertainty for Ruth. Despite the hardships, Ruth chose to cling to Naomi in her faith in the God of Israel, showing incredible perseverance. Her decision was not just about family loyalty but a step of faith, embracing the God of her late husband. In times of crisis, Ruth's actions show us the power of loyalty and the importance of trusting God's purpose, even when everything seems uncertain. This historical context of famine and loss makes Ruth's story even more compelling. Her journey is not just one of physical survival but of spiritual transformation. It is in these dark times that Ruth's character truly shines, proving that faith and perseverance can lead us through even the most challenging circumstances. The decision to stay, Ruth's commitment to Naomi. One of the most defining moments in Ruth's story is her choice to stay with her mother-in-law, Naomi, after the death of her husband. Naomi, grief-stricken and bitter, urged Ruth and her other daughter-in-law, Orpah, to return to their families and start new lives. Orpah obeyed, but Ruth made a radical decision. She chose to stay. Her words, "Where you go, I will go, where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people and your God my God," Ruth 1 verse 16, are among the most powerful declarations of faith and loyalty in the Bible. This choice wasn't just about family, it was a commitment to embrace a new faith, a new people, and a new purpose. Ruth was choosing an uncertain future in a foreign land over the comfort and familiarity of her home. It's this act of faith and loyalty that sets Ruth apart as a woman of incredible character. Despite her status as a foreigner, Ruth showed a deep sense of purpose and trust in God's plan. Ruth's decision also reveals the transformative power of love and commitment. She was willing to sacrifice her own prospects to take care of Naomi, demonstrating a selfless love that mirrors God's love for us. Her faithfulness was not based on what she could gain, but on her devotion to Naomi and to the God of Israel. This decision marked the beginning of Ruth's journey of transformation and redemption. Her commitment was not without challenges. Moving to Bethlehem meant Ruth had to adapt to a new culture, face potential rejection, and work hard to support herself and Naomi. Yet, her perseverance paid off. Ruth's faith and loyalty opened the door to unexpected blessings, proving that when we remain faithful to God and to those we love, He can turn our sacrifices into seeds of hope and purpose. Ruth's story teaches us that faith is not just about following God when the path is clear. It's about trusting Him enough to stay on the path when it's filled with uncertainty and challenges. Her decision to stay was a leap of faith that transformed her life and legacy forever. Ruth's conversion, embracing the faith of Israel's God. Ruth's story is not just about loyalty to Naomi, it's also about a profound spiritual transformation. By choosing to stay with Naomi and follow her to Bethlehem, Ruth was making more than a geographical move, she was embracing a new faith and a new identity. This choice meant leaving behind the gods of Moab and fully committing herself to the God of Israel. Her famous words, "Your God will be my God," Ruth 1 verse 16, signify a pivotal moment of conversion and obedience. This decision was not made lightly. In Moab, Ruth would have had the comfort of family and the security of familiarity. But her choice to follow Naomi's God shows that Ruth saw something different in the God of Israel, something greater than the idols she had known. This was a step of faith, marked by a willingness to surrender her past and trust in a future shaped by God's purpose. Ruth's conversion also speaks to the inclusive nature of God's love. Although she was a foreigner, a Moabite with no claim to the promises of Israel, God welcomed her with open arms because of her faith. Through her humility and perseverance, Ruth demonstrates that true faith is not about where you come from but about where you're willing to go with God. Her story is a reminder that anyone can be transformed by faith, no matter their background. In embracing Naomi's God, Ruth also embraced Naomi's people, customs, and way of life. This required immense courage and humility, as Ruth had to adapt to new traditions and a different culture. Yet, she did so with grace and determination, showing that faith often calls us to step out of our comfort zones and trust in God's leading, even when the road ahead is unclear. Ruth's conversion is not just an event but a process of daily faithfulness. She didn't just make a verbal commitment, she lived out her faith through her actions, working diligently to support Naomi and trusting God's provision. Her journey of faith and transformation is a powerful reminder that when we choose to follow God, He can use our story for a greater purpose than we ever imagined. Loyalty and love, the unbreakable bond between Ruth and Naomi. The relationship between Ruth and Naomi is one of the most touching depictions of loyalty and love in the Bible. Despite having no obligation to stay, Ruth chose to remain by Naomi's side after the death of her husband. This was a commitment not just to a person but to a shared faith and purpose. Ruth's unwavering dedication to Naomi is a beautiful example of how true loyalty can reflect God's unconditional love. Naomi was deeply affected by the tragedies she endured. She felt abandoned and empty, even changing her name to Mara, which means bitter. Yet, Ruth's love and loyalty never wavered. She stood by Naomi's side, becoming a source of hope and support. This bond teaches us that loyalty often means standing with someone through their darkest moments, offering love and companionship when they feel most alone. Ruth's commitment also went beyond words. She acted on her loyalty by leaving her homeland, working tirelessly to provide for Naomi, and following Naomi's guidance in seeking out Boaz. This kind of love and faithfulness is rare and powerful. It shows that love is more than a feeling, it's a choice to act selflessly for the good of another person, even when it requires sacrifice. Their relationship is a testament to how God can use the loyalty of one person to transform the life of another. Through Ruth's perseverance and dedication, Naomi's life was changed from bitterness to joy. Ruth's steadfast love not only restored Naomi's hope but also paved the way for God's redemptive plan to unfold. In the end, their bond was blessed beyond measure, as they became part of God's greater purpose. The bond between Ruth and Naomi is a reminder that loyalty and love are more powerful than any circumstance. Their story shows us that God values our faithfulness, not only to Him but to those He places in our lives. When we commit ourselves to loving others as Ruth did, we reflect God's love and become part of His plan to bring hope and redemption. Overcoming loss, the journey from Moab to Bethlehem. Ruth's story begins with loss and grief. After the death of her husband, Ruth faced a choice: return to her family in Moab or stay with Naomi and face an uncertain future. This was not just a physical journey from Moab to Bethlehem, but an emotional and spiritual journey from despair to hope. Ruth's decision to leave behind everything familiar to support Naomi is a powerful testament to perseverance and the transforming power of faith. The road from Moab to Bethlehem was long and difficult. For Ruth and Naomi, it was not just a journey of miles but of faith. Ruth's willingness to embrace this path, despite the sorrow and uncertainty, speaks to her strength and character. She knew that returning to Bethlehem meant hard work and a struggle for survival, but her faith in God and love for Naomi gave her the courage to keep moving forward. This journey was also marked by humility. As a Moabite widow in Israel, Ruth faced prejudice and potential rejection. Yet, she remained humble, working diligently in the fields to provide for Naomi. Her humility and perseverance are a powerful reminder that faith is not just about big leaps, it's about small, faithful steps in the right direction, trusting God to guide and provide. Ruth's story also highlights the importance of community. When they arrived in Bethlehem, Naomi's friends and relatives gathered around them, offering support and welcoming Ruth despite her foreign status. This sense of community played a crucial role in Ruth's transformation from a grieving widow to a woman of purpose and hope. It shows that in times of loss, we need others to help us find our way back to hope. Ultimately, the journey from Moab to Bethlehem represents more than a physical relocation, it's a journey of transformation. Ruth's faith and perseverance in the face of adversity led her to a place of redemption and blessing. Her story teaches us that even in our deepest losses, God can lead us on a journey to a future filled with hope and purpose. Work and dignity, Ruth's courage in the fields of Boaz. Ruth's story took a remarkable turn when she decided to glean in the fields to provide for herself and Naomi. In ancient Israel, gleaning was a provision for the poor, widows, and foreigners, allowing them to pick up leftover grain after the harvesters. This was not an easy or glamorous task, but Ruth embraced it with humility and perseverance. Her willingness to work hard reflects her dignity and strength, even in challenging circumstances. Despite being a foreigner and a widow, two categories that would have made her vulnerable in that society, Ruth chose to take action instead of waiting for help to come. Her courage is evident in her decision to enter the fields without knowing how she would be treated. Yet, it was through this act of faith and hard work that God positioned her to meet Boaz, the man who would eventually become her husband and redeemer. Boaz noticed Ruth's dedication and was moved by her humility and perseverance. He instructed his workers to protect her and ensure she had more than enough to gather. This act of kindness was a turning point for Ruth. It showed that when we step out in faith and embrace even the simplest tasks with dignity, God's favor and provision follow. Ruth's story teaches us that no work is too small or insignificant when done in faith and with a heart focused on God. Ruth's time in the fields is a powerful example of the value of hard work and integrity. Her humility and willingness to serve not only provided for Naomi but also paved the way for God's redemptive plan to unfold. She didn't allow her status as a foreigner or widow to limit her potential. Instead, she embraced every opportunity with perseverance and a spirit of gratitude. The fields of Boaz became more than just a place of provision, they became the backdrop for Ruth's transformation. What began as a humble task turned into a divine appointment, where God connected her with Boaz and set her on a path toward a new future. Ruth's courage in the fields reminds us that even the simplest acts of faith and hard work can lead to extraordinary outcomes when we trust God with the results. Boaz, the Redeemer of Ruth, and the significance of a kinsman redeemer. Boaz is one of the most compelling characters in the story of Ruth, symbolizing the role of a redeemer in the biblical sense. A kinsman redeemer was a close relative who could restore the honor and security of a family by marrying a widow or buying back property. In this case, Boaz's willingness to step into this role for Ruth was an act of grace and obedience to God's laws, transforming her life and legacy. When Ruth approached Boaz, lying at his feet on the threshing floor, she was symbolically asking him to cover her with his protection and redeem her. This was a bold and humble request, reflecting her faith in God's provision and her understanding of Boaz's honorable character. Boaz's response was one of kindness and respect. He called Ruth a woman of noble character and promised to do everything he could to redeem her, showing that he valued her for more than her background or status. Boaz's role in Ruth's life goes beyond providing for her immediate needs. His willingness to become her kinsman redeemer meant restoring her dignity, providing her with a new identity, and securing her future. This act of redemption mirrors Christ's role as our Redeemer, taking us from a place of need and vulnerability to one of purpose and blessing. Through Boaz, we see a glimpse of God's grace and his desire to redeem and restore all who come to him in faith. Boaz also demonstrated integrity and perseverance in the way he handled the situation. He didn't rush into the role but took the proper steps to ensure that everything was done according to God's law. This included speaking with a closer relative who had the first right to redeem Ruth. When that relative declined, Boaz joyfully took on the role, marrying Ruth and redeeming Naomi's family line. His actions show us that true redemption is not just about duty, it's about love and a willingness to go beyond what is required. In the end, Boaz's role as a redeemer is a beautiful picture of how God works through human faithfulness and obedience. By stepping into Ruth's life, Boaz changed not only her destiny but also the course of biblical history, as their son Obed became the grandfather of King David. Boaz's story reminds us that God's redemption is always greater than we can imagine and that he uses faithful people to accomplish his purposes. Redemption and provision, the encounter between Ruth and Boaz. The turning point in Ruth's story comes and she meets Boaz while gleaning in his fields. This encounter was not a coincidence but a divine appointment. Boaz, a man of integrity and faith, recognized Ruth's perseverance and humility. He was impressed by her courage and willingness to work hard to support Naomi. Ruth's character caught his attention, and he chose to show her kindness and generosity, providing not just grain but also protection and a sense of belonging. Boaz's provision for Ruth went beyond the basic requirements of the law. He instructed his workers to leave extra grain for her to gather and invited her to eat with his harvesters, treating her with dignity and respect. This act of generosity reflects God's heart for the vulnerable and his desire to provide abundantly for those who trust him. Ruth's faith and perseverance positioned her to receive Boaz's favor, demonstrating that God rewards those who step out in obedience, even in small acts. Their encounter also highlights the importance of integrity and kindness in relationships. Boaz didn't view Ruth as just a poor widow or a foreigner. He saw her as a woman of character, worthy of honor and respect. His actions showed that true provision goes beyond meeting physical needs, it involves seeing people for who they are and valuing their dignity. This perspective is essential in understanding God's provision, which is always rooted in love and grace. Through this meeting, God began to unfold his redemptive plan for Ruth and Naomi. Boaz's provision was the beginning of a deeper relationship that would ultimately lead to Ruth's redemption and a secure future. Ruth's story teaches us that when we act in faith and embrace the opportunities God places before us, he can transform simple encounters into life-changing moments. In the fields of Boaz, Ruth found more than food, she found hope, protection, and the beginning of a new chapter in her life. This encounter is a reminder that God's provision often comes in unexpected ways and through people who reflect his heart. Boaz's kindness changed Ruth's story, and their relationship became a picture of God's redeeming love for us. The threshing floor, a step of faith and boldness. One of the most intriguing moments in Ruth's story happens on the threshing floor, where Ruth approaches Boaz during the night. Naomi, aware of Boaz's position as a kinsman redeemer, instructs Ruth to uncover his feet and lie down as a sign of humility and submission. This act might seem unusual to us, but in Ruth's context, it was a profound display of faith and boldness, symbolizing her request for Boaz's protection and redemption. Ruth's actions were daring because she was stepping outside the norm for a foreign woman and a widow. She wasn't being inappropriate, rather, she was taking a step of faith, trusting that Boaz would understand her intentions and respond with integrity. By lying at his feet, Ruth was humbly asking him to take her under his wing as her protector and husband. This move required immense courage, as there was no guarantee of a positive response. Boaz's reaction is equally important. He didn't misinterpret Ruth's actions or take advantage of her vulnerability. Instead, he praised her for her kindness and commitment, recognizing that she was seeking to honor both her family and God's law. Boaz's response showed that he valued Ruth's character and respected her intentions. He promised to take the necessary steps to become her redeemer, showing his own faithfulness and integrity. The threshing floor encounter is a powerful example of how God works through bold, faith-filled actions. Ruth's willingness to step out in faith led to a breakthrough in her relationship with Boaz and the unfolding of God's redemptive plan. It also shows that sometimes faith requires us to take risks, trusting God with the outcome even when we can't see what lies ahead. This moment on the threshing floor teaches us that faith and boldness go hand in hand. Ruth's courage and Boaz's integrity created a foundation of mutual trust and respect, which eventually blossomed into love and redemption. Their story is a reminder that God honors those who act in faith, even when the path is uncertain. He can use our small steps of courage to accomplish great things. Marriage and restoration, Ruth's redemption through Boaz. Ruth's story reaches its climax when Boaz, after carefully navigating the legalities of being a kinsman redeemer, marries Ruth. This marriage is not just the union of two people, it's a powerful symbol of restoration and redemption. For Ruth, it meant the end of her days as a grieving widow and the beginning of a new chapter filled with hope and promise. For Naomi, it signified the restoration of her family line and the redemption of everything she thought she had lost. Boaz's decision to marry Ruth wasn't just an act of duty, it was a choice motivated by love and respect. He admired Ruth's faithfulness and courage, and he willingly took on the responsibility of redeeming her and Naomi's family. His actions reflect God's redemptive nature, he is always willing to go the extra mile to restore and bless those who trust in him. Through Boaz, we see a glimpse of how God redeems our brokenness and turns our stories into something beautiful. Their marriage is also a picture of God's inclusive love. Ruth, a Moabite, had no rightful claim to the blessings of Israel. Yet, through Boaz's love and God's grace, she became part of the lineage that would lead to King David and, ultimately, to Jesus Christ. This teaches us that God's grace transcends all boundaries. It doesn't matter where we come from, what matters is our faith and willingness to trust in His plan. The marriage of Ruth and Boaz also brought restoration to Naomi. What began as a story of loss and despair ended in joy and fulfillment. Naomi, who once felt abandoned and empty, became the grandmother of Obed, the child who would carry on her family's name. Through Ruth's faith and Boaz's redemption, God restored everything Naomi had lost, showing that his plans are always for our good, even when we can't see it. This marriage was more than just a personal blessing, it was a fulfillment of God's promise and a key part of his greater plan for the nation of Israel. Ruth's redemption through Boaz points us to the ultimate Redeemer, Jesus, who offers restoration and new life to all who come to him. Just as Boaz took Ruth from a place of need to a place of honor, Jesus redeems our lives and restores our dignity, giving us a new identity and purpose. The birth of Obed, a new beginning and a continuation of God's plan. The birth of Ruth and Boaz's son, Obed, marks a significant turning point in the story. This child was more than just a blessing to Ruth and Boaz, he was a symbol of new beginnings and hope for the future. For Naomi, who had lost her husband and sons, Obed's birth was a restoration of everything she thought she would never have again. Through this child, God turned her mourning into joy and her emptiness into fullness. Obed's birth also had a greater significance in God's plan. He was not just a son to Ruth and Boaz but the grandfather of King David, one of Israel's greatest leaders. This lineage, which started with the faithfulness and perseverance of a Moabite woman and a humble Israelite farmer, would ultimately lead to the birth of Jesus Christ. Ruth's story shows us that God's purposes are always bigger than our own lives. He uses our faithfulness to weave his greater story of redemption. This new beginning was not the result of luck or chance, it was the fruit of Ruth's faith, Boaz's obedience, and God's faithfulness. Obed's birth brought joy not only to Ruth and Naomi but also to the entire community, who celebrated God's goodness and the continuation of his promises. This moment teaches us that when we remain faithful, God can turn our smallest acts of faith into something that impacts generations. The birth of Obed also highlights the theme of legacy. Ruth, a foreigner and widow, became the matriarch of a royal lineage through her faith and perseverance. Her story is a reminder that God can use anyone, no matter their background or circumstances, to fulfill his purposes. Ruth's legacy wasn't just about her own redemption but about the hope and promise she brought to future generations. Obed's birth is a testimony to God's power to redeem and restore. What began as a story of loss and hardship ended in joy and blessing. Through Ruth's perseverance and Boaz's faithfulness, God brought forth a new beginning that would bless not only their family but the entire nation of Israel. This story encourages us to trust that God is always working, even in the darkest seasons, to bring about a future filled with hope and promise. Naomi's transformation, from bitterness to joy. Naomi's journey in the book of Ruth is a powerful story of transformation. When she first returned to Bethlehem, she was overwhelmed with grief and despair, feeling that God had turned against her. Naomi even asked to be called Mara, which means bitter, because of the sorrow she had experienced. Yet, through Ruth's unwavering loyalty and God's faithfulness, Naomi's story didn't end in bitterness. Instead, it became one of restoration and joy. Naomi's transformation began when Ruth chose to stay by her side. This act of loyalty gave Naomi a glimmer of hope, reminding her that she wasn't completely abandoned. Despite her bitterness, Naomi continued to guide Ruth, showing that even in her pain, she still held on to some faith in God's provision. This willingness to look out for Ruth's welfare, even when she was hurting, shows the depth of Naomi's character. Her true transformation, however, took place as she witnessed God's hand at work in Ruth's life. Naomi went from feeling hopeless to actively participating in God's redemptive plan. When Ruth met Boaz, Naomi began to see God's favor unfolding. She encouraged Ruth to seek Boaz's protection and supported her every step of the way. This shift in Naomi's outlook shows how God can use small signs of hope to rekindle our faith. By the time Ruth married Boaz and gave birth to Obed, Naomi's joy was fully restored. The women of the town celebrated with her, proclaiming that Ruth's love was better than that of 7 sons. Naomi, who had felt empty and forsaken, was now surrounded by community, love, and the promise of a future through her grandson, Obed. Her transformation is a testament to God's ability to turn our mourning into dancing and to restore joy where there was once only pain. Naomi's story teaches us that no situation is too far gone for God to redeem. Even when we feel bitter and broken, God is still at work, weaving a story of hope and restoration. Her journey from bitterness to joy shows that God's plans for us are always for our good, even when we can't see them. Naomi's transformation reminds us to hold on, because God can turn our sorrow into joy in ways we never imagined. Ruth's legacy, the Moabite woman in the lineage of Christ. Ruth's inclusion in the genealogy of Jesus Christ is both surprising and significant. As a Moabite woman, Ruth was not originally part of God's chosen people. The Moabites were often viewed as outsiders and were historically enemies of Israel. Yet, through God's grace, Ruth was not only welcomed into the community of Israel but also became a vital part of the lineage that would lead to the birth of the Savior. Her story demonstrates God's ability to use anyone, regardless of their background, to accomplish His purposes. Ruth's legacy began with her decision to leave Moab and follow Naomi to Bethlehem. This choice marked a turning point, as Ruth's faith and loyalty set her apart. Instead of returning to her people and her gods, she chose to embrace the God of Israel. This step of faith opened the door for God to use her in ways she could never have imagined. Ruth's story is a reminder that when we surrender our lives to God, He can turn our ordinary decisions into extraordinary legacies. Her legacy was solidified through her marriage to Boaz and the birth of her son, Obed. From this humble beginning came the line of David, Israel's greatest king. Ruth's faithfulness not only brought redemption to her own life but also had a lasting impact on the entire nation of Israel. Her inclusion in the lineage of Jesus shows that God's grace knows no boundaries. He can take someone who seems unlikely and place them at the center of His redemptive plan. Ruth's legacy also speaks to the value of character and faith over heritage. In a culture that valued lineage and status, Ruth's story stands out because she was a foreigner. Yet, it was her faith, loyalty, and integrity that God used to establish a royal line. This teaches us that God is not limited by our past or our background. He looks at the heart, and when He finds faith, He can do great things through anyone. Today, Ruth's legacy continues to inspire people of all backgrounds. Her story is a reminder that God's love and redemption are available to all who seek Him. Through Ruth, we see that even when we feel like outsiders, God invites us to be part of His family in His story. Her life encourages us to trust in God's plan and to believe that He can use our faith to leave a lasting impact for generations to come. God's providence, divine appointments in Ruth's journey. Ruth's story is a beautiful example of God's providence at work. From the outside, her journey may have seemed like a series of random events: losing her husband, choosing to follow Naomi, ending up in Boaz's field. But each step was guided by God's unseen hand, orchestrating events for His greater purpose. Ruth's life teaches us that what may look like coincidence is often God's plan unfolding in our lives. The first sign of God's providence is seen in Ruth's decision to stay with Naomi. This choice was the beginning of a journey that would lead to unimaginable blessings. Ruth's faithfulness to Naomi positioned her for God's favor, showing that even small acts of loyalty can be used by God to accomplish His purposes. Her arrival in Bethlehem just so happened to coincide with the beginning of the barley harvest, a detail that would lead her directly to Boaz. God's hand is also evident in Ruth's encounter with Boaz. The Bible notes that Ruth happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, Ruth 2 verse 3. This was no accident. God was directing her steps, placing her in the right place at the right time to meet her Redeemer. This divine appointment set the stage for Ruth's redemption and the restoration of Naomi's family. It teaches us that when we step out in faith, God guides our path in ways we may not immediately recognize. Even the obstacles Ruth and Boaz faced were part of God's plan. Boaz's careful handling of the legalities surrounding Ruth's redemption shows that God's timing is perfect. The process may have seemed slow and uncertain, but every detail was working toward God's ultimate purpose. Boaz's integrity and patience in seeking Ruth's redemption reflect God's faithfulness in fulfilling his promises. Ruth's story reminds us that God's providence is often revealed in ordinary moments. Whether we are facing trials or making daily choices, God is at work behind the scenes, weaving our lives into his greater story. Her journey encourages us to trust that God's plans are always good, even when we can't see the full picture. Through Ruth, we learn that God's providence is not always dramatic, but it is always present, guiding us toward his purpose and blessing. Ruth's loyalty, a model of commitment and faithfulness. Ruth's unwavering loyalty to Naomi is one of the most defining characteristics of her story. When Naomi decided to return to Bethlehem after the death of her husband and sons, she urged Ruth to stay behind in Moab, where she might have a chance to remarry and build a new life. But Ruth's response was both surprising and profound. "Where you go, I will go, where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God." Ruth 1 verse 16. This declaration marked the beginning of a lifelong commitment that changed both of their lives. Ruth's loyalty went beyond familial duty. It was a choice made out of love, faith, and a deep commitment to Naomi's well-being. She willingly left behind everything familiar, her country, her culture, and her family, to journey into an uncertain future. Her decision demonstrates that true loyalty is selfless. It is a willingness to stand by someone, even when it means sacrificing your own comfort and security. Ruth's choice to accompany Naomi was not just a commitment to her mother-in-law but also to the God of Israel, whom she had come to trust. This kind of loyalty is rare and inspiring. Ruth didn't know what awaited her in Bethlehem. As a foreign widow, she faced potential rejection and poverty. Yet, her loyalty compelled her to follow Naomi, trusting that God would provide. Ruth's commitment was not based on circumstances or convenience, it was rooted in faith. This teaches us that true loyalty is steadfast and enduring, even in the face of uncertainty. Ruth's loyalty bore fruit not only in her own life but also in Naomi's. Her presence brought hope and comfort to a grieving woman who felt abandoned and bitter. Through Ruth's unwavering support, Naomi experienced God's kindness and provision, ultimately leading her to a place of restoration and joy. Ruth's loyalty transformed Naomi's despair into hope and set the stage for God's redemptive plan. In today's world, Ruth's loyalty is a powerful example of faithfulness and commitment. It shows us that loyalty is more than just a feeling, it is a choice that often requires courage and sacrifice. Her story challenges us to be loyal in our relationships, to stand by those we love, and to trust in God's faithfulness, even when the path is unclear. Ruth's loyalty to Naomi is a timeless reminder that true commitment can change lives and impact generations. The role of community, how Ruth and Naomi found support. The role of community is a crucial theme in Ruth's story. When Ruth and Naomi returned to Bethlehem, they were two vulnerable widows with little hope for the future. Yet, instead of facing their struggles alone, they were embraced by their community. The women of Bethlehem welcomed Naomi back and later celebrated the birth of Ruth's son, Obed. This support network played a significant role in Ruth and Naomi's journey, reminding us of the power of community in times of need. From the beginning, Naomi and Ruth relied on each other for support. Naomi guided Ruth and helped her navigate the customs of Israel, while Ruth's loyalty and hard work brought provision and stability to their household. Their relationship shows that community starts with just two people who are willing to share their burdens and support one another. Together, they faced the challenges of being widows and foreigners, drawing strength from their mutual commitment and faith. The community's support extended beyond just Ruth and Naomi. Boaz, as a respected member of the community, showed kindness and protection to Ruth when she gleaned in his fields. He ensured her safety, provided for her needs, and ultimately took on the role of kinsman redeemer, marrying her and restoring Naomi's family line. Boaz's actions reflect the broader role of community in God's plan, showing that when we look out for others, we become part of God's redemptive work. Even the women of Bethlehem played a role in this story. They welcomed Naomi, even in her bitterness, and later celebrated Ruth's marriage and the birth of Obed. Their joy and support were a testament to the healing power of a caring community. By affirming Ruth's place among them, they helped transform Naomi's sorrow into joy and gave Ruth a sense of belonging in a foreign land. The role of community in Ruth's story teaches us that we are not meant to face life's challenges alone. Just as Ruth and Naomi found strength in each other and support from their community, we too are called to be sources of encouragement and help to those around us. God often works through people to bring about His plans and provide comfort, reminding us that we are stronger together. Ruth's story shows that a loving community can be a powerful force for healing, restoration, and hope. Ruth and Boaz, a story of love and redemption. The relationship between Ruth and Boaz is often celebrated as a beautiful love story, but it's also much more. Their union is a picture of God's redemption and grace. Boaz, as the kinsman redeemer, willingly took Ruth under his protection, restored Naomi's family line, and brought hope and stability to both women. His love for Ruth was not based on external factors but on her character, faithfulness, and courage. In Boaz's actions, we see a reflection of God's love, steadfast, compassionate, and redeeming. Their love story began in a field, where Ruth was gleaning to provide for Naomi. Boaz noticed Ruth's dedication and kindness and took steps to ensure her safety. He instructed his workers to leave extra grain for her, invited her to eat with him, and made sure she was treated with respect. This early interaction set the tone for their relationship, one marked by generosity, protection, and honor. As their story progressed, Ruth took the bold step of approaching Boaz at the threshing floor, asking him to spread his cloak over her as a sign of his willingness to be her redeemer. This was not just a marriage proposal, it was a request for protection and redemption. Boaz's response was one of admiration and respect. He praised Ruth for her kindness and integrity, agreeing to take the necessary steps to secure her future. His willingness to go through the proper channels, despite potential complications, showed his commitment to doing what was right. The culmination of their love story is their marriage, which not only brought personal happiness but also fulfilled God's plan for both Ruth and Naomi. Through Boaz's love and redemption, Ruth found a place in the community of Israel and became the great-grandmother of King David. Their story teaches us that true love is selfless, patient, and redemptive. It goes beyond personal desires to seek the well-being of the other and is willing to make sacrifices for the sake of what is right. Ruth and Boaz's love story is a reminder that God's plans for us are often bigger than we can imagine. What started as an act of kindness in a field ended in a marriage that would change the course of history. Their story encourages us to trust God's timing and to believe that He can bring about redemption and blessing through relationships built on faith, integrity, and love. Faith in action, Ruth's choices and their impact. Ruth's story is a powerful testament to the impact of faith in action. Her life illustrates that faith is not merely a belief but a choice to act in trust, even in challenging circumstances. When faced with the decision to return to Moab or follow Naomi, Ruth chose the latter, demonstrating her commitment to both Naomi and the God of Israel. This choice not only changed her life but also altered the trajectory of Naomi's life, showcasing how our decisions can ripple through the lives of those around us. Ruth's faith was evident in her willingness to embrace the unknown. Leaving her homeland and choosing to support Naomi required immense courage and trust in God's plan. She didn't have guarantees of success or comfort. Instead, she chose to step out in faith, believing that God would provide. This act of faith laid the foundation for her blessings and marked the beginning of her incredible journey. Moreover, Ruth's actions during the harvest season exemplified her proactive approach to life. Instead of waiting for help to arrive, she went to glean in the fields, demonstrating a strong work ethic and determination to care for Naomi. Her willingness to engage in hard work not only provided for their needs but also caught the attention of Boaz. This teaches us that faith often requires us to take initiative and be active participants in God's plan. The consequences of Ruth's choices were profound. By aligning herself with Naomi and choosing to follow God, Ruth found favor in the eyes of Boaz and became part of God's redemptive story. Her actions opened doors to blessings that she could never have imagined. Ruth's faith in action serves as a reminder that when we trust God and make choices that honor Him, we pave the way for His blessings in our lives. In our own lives, Ruth's example challenges us to consider how our choices reflect our faith. Are we willing to step out in trust, even when the path is uncertain? Ruth's story encourages us to act on our beliefs, to serve others, and to engage in the work God has set before us. When we combine our faith with action, we become instruments of God's purpose, capable of making a lasting impact on our world. God's unchanging faithfulness, lessons from Ruth's story. Ruth's narrative ultimately reveals the unwavering faithfulness of God. Throughout her journey, we see how God was at work, orchestrating events to fulfill His promises and provide for His people. From Ruth's decision to follow Naomi to her marriage with Boaz, God's hand can be seen guiding their steps, illustrating that His faithfulness is constant, even in the midst of hardship. One of the most striking aspects of Ruth's story is how God turned her losses into blessings. After losing her husband and leaving her homeland, Ruth could have easily succumbed to despair. However, her choice to cling to Naomi and embrace the God of Israel marked the beginning of a new chapter filled with hope. This transformation shows us that God's faithfulness can bring beauty from ashes and joy from sorrow. Boaz's role as the kinsman redeemer further highlights God's faithfulness. In ancient Israel, the law allowed a close relative to redeem a family member in need, ensuring that the family line continued. Boaz's willingness to step into this role for Ruth and Naomi demonstrates how God uses people to fulfill His promises. His actions serve as a reminder that God often works through others to provide for us and show His love. The birth of Obed, Ruth's son, is a significant moment that underscores God's faithfulness. Obed not only brought joy to Naomi and Ruth but also became the grandfather of King David. This lineage would eventually lead to Jesus Christ, fulfilling God's ultimate plan for redemption. Through this, we see that God's faithfulness extends beyond our individual stories, weaving a larger narrative that impacts generations. In our lives, Ruth's story encourages us to trust in God's faithfulness. No matter the circumstances we face, God remains steadfast and true. He invites us to lean on Him, knowing that He is actively working for our good. Ruth's journey is a testament to the fact that when we place our trust in God, we can experience His faithfulness in profound ways. As we reflect on Ruth's story, may we be inspired to trust in God's promises and remain open to the ways He is working in our lives, even when we cannot see the whole picture. God's faithfulness is unwavering, and His plans are always for our good, reminding us that we are part of a much larger story of redemption and hope. What a ride! Ruth's journey is such a powerful reminder that no matter our circumstances, we can choose faith and make a difference in the lives of those around us. Whether it's being loyal to our loved ones or stepping out in trust, her story encourages us to embrace our own journeys with courage. If this video inspired you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. Your support means the world to us and helps spread these uplifting stories.